Hello, good evening. You're beautiful. It's great to see you. It is late on a Tuesday night. It's 8 o'clock Central. I'm Cameron with LearnAVL. I'm excited to be together on tonight's webinar. Tried something new last week where we were on Zoom for the LearnAVL members and also just put it out there on YouTube, on our YouTube page for free. And I'm going to do that again tonight. Just going to put that out there and see how that goes. And we'll see how the view count is on that later, if that's something that's helpful for folks in general. Let me tell you what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about going from a church volunteer to a freelancer, something I touched on last week. If you want to look at last week's webinar, it will be a good kind of precursor into this. Last week, I talked about kind of the mindset and secrets to success, tips from me over the years. This week, I'm going to get down to a little more brass tacks on, okay, you've decided you want to be a freelancer in the area, now what? And that's what I'm going to be going through. I've got a deck with probably a dozen points in it. I'll try to watch the time and keep a good pace. If you don't know what this is, if this is your first webinar tuning in, you don't know what's going on, this is LearnAVL. I'm Cameron. I wandered up to the sound booth at my church when I was 12, had an incredible mentor who taught me everything, and then had another mentor. I had 6 good years of training from 12 to 18, went to college, mentored some folks where I became the mentor in college during our college worship ministry, got out, started serving in our local church where my wife, Laura, and I have been members for over 8 years. And with each year that passes, I realized just how precious it was that I had that mentorship. I see a lot of churches. I still help a lot of churches. We do a lot of trainings and consulting and things for churches. And I continue to realize, wow, there's some churches out there that just don't have that. They're not fortunate enough to have that. And some of those churches are really small. And so you'd say, oh, it's because they're so small. Some of the churches are really big. It doesn't really have anything to do with congregation size or budget on whether your congregation is going to be blessed with someone who's a production professional who wants to pour into your volunteers. And so Michael and I have been doing church trainings and things for almost a decade now, where we travel. We spend a weekend with a church, a Saturday training. We mix or cut or LD on Sunday morning, and then stay after and ask questions, answer questions, and then go home. And it's just a very limited structure. It's just kind of a traditional structure to physically drive and be there. The church has to pay the honorarium and the travel expenses and everything, and then maybe half the volunteers don't show up. Or maybe you get all the volunteers there, but then 2 weeks later, a new volunteer joins the church and they missed all of that training. And so we're trying to take everything that we've taught and transfer it, instead of being a weekend where it's 8 hours a day and your mind is just swimming, drinking from the fire hose, and your sponge is full, it's overflowing. We're trying to break it down into little 1 hour chunks. And that's really what LearnAVL is. We're asking churches who have been paying us to come and do a training for a weekend to just pivot those funds towards more of a subscription model like this, where the content is available on demand for volunteers asynchronously. In my opinion, the hardest part about doing a training is just wrangling the calendar and getting the volunteers together. And we're hoping to solve that with this. So this is my weekly webinar. Philip Johnson does a weekly webinar on Monday nights. He's a great presenter that we have, a true friend, asset to LearnAVL as a teacher. And then Michael Curtis does his on Wednesday nights. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 8, we're doing these webinars. There's also a forum. If you're a member, if your church has signed up, then you're a volunteer and you've got membership to the forum. So highly recommend hopping on there and not only commenting and asking us questions and getting advice from us as the experts, but also talking amongst yourselves and gaining insight from brothers and sisters across the country in multiple time zones who are doing the same thing that you're doing. Anyways, it's a little bit about LearnAVL, about what this is, tonight's purpose, helping you transition into freelancing. If that's relevant for you, hang on, and we're going to get started. Let me share my slides with you. Give me just a second, and I will. Great. Hopefully you can see those slides. You can still hear me. Hopefully I'm up in the corner. YouTube seems to still be stable, which is fantastic. So this is becoming a production freelancer. And the tagline I put is grow and serve your church better by getting up and running as a local production freelancer. Really, the heart behind this is, if all of your production experience is just in the four walls of your church, or maybe 2 or 3 churches, maybe the church you grew up in, the church you went to in college, and the church where you call home now, you're really limiting your knowledge and your growth. And so I think that you can grow personally and ultimately serve your church better by getting out of those four walls and getting up and running as a local production freelancer. Not to mention, Jesus said it's not the well who need a doctor, it's the sick are who need a doctor. And so he was not always in the synagogues, he was out in the street. And so freelancing out in the marketplace gives you a chance to kind of get out of the holy huddle of our churches that we're in and hit the streets. So anyways, I broke into tonight's talk into 3 parts. I think I have 4 points under each part to kind of set a pace and set expectations. I'm going to talk for maybe half an hour. I'm going to save time at the end for questions. If you have any questions, if you're on Zoom and you're a member, hit the Q&A button and put those questions in there. You can also use the chat feature if you just want to chat with each other. I don't really look at the chat. I look at the Q&A. So if you have a question, make sure it's in the Q&A. There's a way that you can do that on YouTube. I'm not going to be able to look at that. I'm kind of flying solo tonight from home. Excuse me. And so I cannot really keep up with the YouTube chat if there's any chatter on there. We didn't really advertise this or promote it. So it's really just kind of out there publicly, almost more for archival. But if you're on YouTube Live, welcome, and maybe say hello in the chat, but I probably won't see it till we're over. All right, let's dive in and get started. Oh, one last thing. If you have any other questions that aren't related to the lesson, it's okay. Submit those to after we're done. You know, if there are any questions about the lesson, I'm happy to hit those. And then I will turn the recording off. I will turn the stream off publicly, and I'm happy to just talk one-on-one with you about maybe something that blew up on Sunday or anything that doesn't have to be related to this topic at all. Audio, video, lighting, whatever you want to talk about. We're here almost to kind of be like a professor staying after class and just have a one-on-one with you. So here we are. We're at LearnAVL. That's Learn Audio, Video, Lighting. And this is kind of a general topic tonight, not specific to any one department. So part 1 of tonight's talk, I want to talk about some concepts and things to grasp. So first, as you're thinking about becoming a freelancer, last week we talked about being available is key. Go back and watch last week. It's great. Now that you've made that decision, you need to realize right out the gate, point number 1 of 12 tonight is your utilization is greater than your pricing. And what I mean here is how much money you can make doing this, which then in turn fuels how sustainable it is for you to do this, which in turn fuels your growth, kind of getting the productivity loop and the flywheel spinning on this. You being utilized is more important than you being expensive. For instance, some sample day rates, let's call it $300, $400, $500, just kind of low, medium, and high. And, you know, you could say, hey, I'm probably not super available. I can only do this a few times a year. And so I'm going to set my day rate really high so that when I do have an opportunity, I make the most possible. My point on this first slide is that you actually do the direct opposite, that you start your day rate as low as you possibly can. $300, if we're just picking some arbitrary numbers here, $300 for a 10-hour day, time and a half overtime after the 10th hour. So an 8 to 6 day, starting at 6, you start charging by the hour, not by the day. And those hours are at 1.5x. So 300 a day for 10 hours, that's $45 an hour in overtime. Anyways, it's more important that you're filling your calendar than it is that you're raising your prices. I would start with the lowest price in this example, $300, and I would keep it that low until one of 2 things has happened. Either A, you've completely filled the calendar. And I mean like completely, like you're working 5, 6, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year. At that point, you can raise your price to $350 and see who falls off, and $400 and see who falls off, and then backfill. And that's how you can kind of climb in annual compensation in this field. That's one route that can happen. Another route that can happen that you could watch out for is, let's say you're on a desert island in the middle of nowhere, Hawaii, or you might as well be in middle of nowhere, Arkansas, or something like that. And there's honestly, you know, only going to be a handful of gigs each year, and you are available for all of them, and they're happy to pay you $400, and you're just lowballing it. Sure, raise your rates in that point. But there's a big difference there. If you're kind of running around saying, hey, I'm $500 a day because I can't do this very often. If you chart that and you say, okay, I can't do it very often, but then on this axis, it's not every gig can pay that much. You're kind of landing low on you're expensive and there's not very many options and half of them can't afford you. Hopefully this makes sense. I want to keep a pace. So be cheap and go out often until your calendar is full, then raise your prices. You cannot charge $1,000 a day and be sustainable in this industry. But you can work 5, 6, 7 days a week by having your utilization figured out and your calendar being full. That's point number one. Hopefully that makes sense as you're kind of setting out to do this. Establishing a rate. This is probably the first question. So the reason I'm doing this webinar tonight is I have these conversations all the time. A friend will call me and say, hey man, I just moved into a bigger city, and we were about to adopt our third kid or something like that, and I need to make some money on the side. I want to get set up as a freelancer. I did it in college. I direct cameras at my church. I think I'm good enough to be a freelance camera director, but I don't know where to begin. We'll go have an ice cream cone or sit down or something like that. And those conversations that I've had now for over a decade, those are the conversations that I'm kind of pulling this information from. These are real conversations that I've had and proven advice and paths that I've put people on. Establishing a rate, I mentioned earlier, kind of a low, medium, high. I would, your first 3, 4, 5 phone calls that you can get on, and we'll talk more about networking here in just a second. But the first 3, 4, 5 interactions that you have, when somebody's going to give you a shot, here's your first shot. Maybe be quick to listen and slow to speak, as James 1:19 says, and maybe don't volunteer a rate on that call. Ask for what it was. That's what I did early. I was a camera op. It was my first freelance position. A great place to start, by the way. A great place to sit and observe and learn and kind of look around at what else is going on in the other departments. And I wasn't sure what to charge. I knew, at special events at church, if there was a external concert or a wedding or something like that, how much they paid camera ops. And that was $50, by the way. And so the first time I'd kind of been talking and trying to get my name out and stuff. The first time somebody called and said, hey, Cameron, we've got a show. Love to have you on camera 3 for it. What's your rate? I would have said $50. And not only would that have been bad news compared to my $300, $400, and $500 example tiers in the last slide, but I don't think it would have bred a lot of confidence in that person who's hiring me. Not because being expensive gives them confidence, but that just told them that this is my first gig. Because anyone who says, oh, $50, this person, anybody's going to be gracious enough to immediately correct them and say, hey, you could get at least $175 for that. Like, come on. And so your second call, you would say $175 at least. If you said $50, you just told them it's your first call. Production's a high risk environment where you're being put on something that only happens once. It's kind of like live TV. It's only going to happen once. And so that person who's in charge of hiring is not going to feel very confident putting you in that seat. So I would be quick to listen. I would tell them, hey, I've been running a camera for almost a decade, but I don't freelance very often, and I just moved here, or whatever. In whatever instance, kind of these hypothetical scenarios I'm coming up with. If you want to tell me what you're used to paying, maybe kind of a range. I'm happy to sit in the middle of that range, or you can pay me on the bottom of that range, or wherever you want to be. I'm more interested in doing more work together than I am making as much as I can this one time. So what would that rate be? And they may say, hey, we're between 175 and 350. And so, if you're good, I'm good for 250 or something, if that sounds good. And then you have the chance to say, yeah, 250 sounds great, or even round down. Well, let's do 200 the first time. If I exceed your expectations, then maybe we'll make it up for it on another time. And then you're kind of baiting the hook for them to call you a second time, almost as a favor, because you gave a discount. But whatever you do, it's kind of like if you would like get on monster.com and you're like, what does a high school history teacher make or something? This is from experience of what I did in college. You see the numbers and you're like, oh, I'm going to be all right. This is pretty good. I don't know where they get all this data from all over the country and stuff. And then you apply for your first job and you see the salary and you say, is this like, is this correct? Is this my gross salary or my net salary? And so I wouldn't get on monster.com and look up what full-time professionals make. And in the same way, I wouldn't ask around too much what other people charge. I think that's everyone's knee-jerk reaction. They say, hey, I'm thinking about getting into freelancing. There's a guy in town who's a full-time freelancer. He's kind of like the guru. He's Yoda. And so I took him to breakfast last week, and, he told me, his rate is $550. And so, I figured, I don't know anything about audio, what he does, but I'm a video director. And so, I mean, I feel like I'm probably about as good as he is. So I'm going to come in at like 525. That's a mistake. Anyone who's experienced enough and comfortable and confident enough to share their rate is somebody who's in a completely different galaxy than you. So I'd really start low and work your way up kind of year over year. When someone calls you for a repeat show, when it has been 12 months, perhaps then you could up your rate. Networking, a good moment to throw in an anecdote here. All I've talked about so far is live event production. So audio, video, lighting on site, doing a live event. I think a lot of this applies to broadcast television as well. I'm not as versed in like the sports world and news and things like that. But I also think this applies in film and creative and commercial video shoots. Maybe you're a video editor. Maybe you can do some After Effects work. Maybe you're really good with a camera and you consider yourself a talented director of photography, a DP. I think a lot of these principles can apply there. And forgive me if most of my examples are in the event world. That's where most of my freelancing was. Now that I am, full-time professional, owner of a production company, I do both equally and spend a lot of time at both. But when I was freelancing, which is the mindset that I'm in and how I'm advising you tonight, kind of the first 6 months of your freelance career, where I was doing mostly live. So forgive me if this is a little bit pigeonholed. I believe anyone can learn anything at any time if they're listening. And I think that you can apply and kind of pivot what you're hearing from me into other verticals and industries if you can be creative in how you're listening. Networking. It's going to be really important that you network extremely hard. Sales is a numbers game, and to close a sale, to have somebody book you, you got about a 1 in 10 shot of whoever you meet calling you back, and then you've got about a 1 in 10 shot of them saying yes. Once you do, say your rate and kind of come to terms and agree with what the scope of work is. And so 1 out of 10 and 1 out of those 10, that's a 1 in 100 chance. And so you really need to be networking extremely hard, which I think ironically as production people, we do incredibly hard things. And in fact, when you saw this slide, your mind may have even thought, oh, good, networking. I know my way around Wi-Fi and a router and a switch. That sounds good. I'll get good at networking. And perhaps you'd even be more comfortable upside down in a network closet patching something than you would at a networking event. But I want to push you to network. And this isn't a chamber of commerce, go to the donuts and coffee morning party. There'll be 300 people there and 299 of them won't understand what production is. So don't go there to network. Go where the trough is and meet the other hogs. So where in your area are folks who do production gathering? You can't really get a backstage pass to the local concert venue, but you can show up early that morning or the day before or the day after when they're setting up or cleaning up and security's not tight. Those are places to network. If you're going to do that, show up, look the part. Again, those are some points I made more clearly last week, so I won't get into that, but just realize there's a Kevin Costner movie from when I'm growing up called Field of Dreams. Maybe you've seen it. And the phrase from Field of Dreams was, if you build it, they will come. And darn it, they did. The guy mowed down his cornfield and built a baseball diamond. And ghosts came out of the corn. It's the darndest thing. Haven't seen that since, though. Haven't seen that in real life. And unfortunately, in business, sometimes we have this lofty idea that if we build it, they will come. Meaning, if I'm a great audio tech, the phone's just going to ring off the hook. And that's just not true. I don't know if that's my millennial generation in me saying that everybody deserves a trophy. And my mom said I'm special. And so, darn it, the phone's just going to ring, or what that is. But I think we often get into business because we love the craft. A chef opens a restaurant. They're not necessarily excited about payroll, and they're not necessarily excited about networking and sales and posters and things, but that's what drives people to your local restaurant is those Google reviews and the getting on Yelp. It has very little to do with how good the food actually is. As much as you can be back there crafting it and taking it from 90% good to 94% good, the average person's palate's about 20%. So you have long surpassed their standard of excellence. So Anyways, a little bit of a tangent there, but just make sure that you're not sitting at home geeking out, watching tutorial after tutorial and reading technical manual after technical manual and just wondering why the phone won't ring, because I've been there and it was a long, cold season, and it's not something you want. Network, do the hard thing, and then enjoy the fruit of your discipline. Last point on this slide, and then we'll get into part two. Thanks for hanging in there. Again, if you have questions, you can go in the Q&A. Appreciate you guys being on tonight. It is who you know. And I think a lot of times we've heard that before, maybe in the production industry. It's not what you know, it's who you know. But it really is. The networking example I had earlier is kind of networking with anybody that's in production, getting backstage when they're setting up, showing up the next morning when they're cleaning up, things like that. Those are good. It's a little bit of a shotgun approach. It's kind of like a billboard on the side of the highway, just hoping the right person will see it. It's a little bit of a broad net. What I mean by who you know is there is probably one person at your local production company, or you may have a few local production companies if you're in a larger market than I am here in little old Arkansas, which I love Arkansas. No offense there to Arkansas. It wouldn't be anywhere else in the world, but it's a small market. And so there's just a few companies here. Well, that means there's probably like 3 people that really make all the decisions for all crewing and who's going to be on what crew and kind of where you are in the pecking order as the new guy or new girl. And so make no mistake, you want to network and talk with random people and kind of understand, okay, I didn't know there was another production company, or who is that? What is their address? Where are they? And that's good to kind of get an understanding of the region. But again, as I said earlier, 1 out of 100, it's not going to take root and really bring fruit unless you get directly to the decision maker who is making those decisions and stay top of mind for them. You need to email them once a month unless they tell you that that's annoying, and please stop, and just check in and say, hey, it's me. I'd love to direct any shows you have this month. If it's too soon for me to be trusted as a director, I'd love to be a camera op. It's too soon for that. I'd love to page cables and anything I can do to earn your trust. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it for 10 years, but I understand that you don't know me. And so however I need to gain that trust to be in the position that I do best. So continue to foster those relationships with the people who are actually the decision makers. It really is who you know. That's it for section 1. We're now in section 2. Setting yourself up. This is really the nuts and bolts, the brass tacks, the stuff that when I tune into a webinar, great, there's all the intro, okay, but let's get down to business. And that's what this stuff is. This is kind of part 2 and getting set up. So these are some common questions I get asked over an ice cream cone as people are trying to get things going for themselves. What's in a name? A lot of times people spend a little too much energy, I think, on their branding and what they're going to call themselves. I've got a great friend who took me to ice cream a couple years ago, and he had these big, impressive names, dreamed up, really creative. Like he had spent a lot of time on this, and that's great. It's your business. That's great. And I've got another friend who did the same thing. He's got a really cool name, cool logo, cool website. Great guy, very talented. But at the end of the day, they don't have employees. They don't have equipment. They're not trying to be like a full service production company with dozens of employees. That's not what they want to do. They just want to be a freelancer. And so I want to discourage you a little bit from maybe over branding or overthinking the name. If it's going to just be you, if what you're setting yourself up for, which is really what this webinar is about, is you being a freelancer, period, that's it. Then just keep it simple. For some just direct, blunt advice, like my name is Cameron McGee. I would probably name it Cameron McGee Services or McGee Services or McGee Production Services, Cameron McGee Production, something like that. The first 2 years I was doing this, every single check that showed up was made out to Cameron McGee. And that's a problem. We'll talk about that in a minute on getting organized on the finance side. You don't want it made out to yourself personally. You want it made out to your business name. And so it would have been convenient if if it was Cameron McGee, and then I could always just put services. I could write services in at the bottom of that check, Cameron McGee Services, and then get it in the bank, which we'll talk about the bank here in a minute too. But just don't overthink it. I think it'd be silly if you had some goofy, or not goofy, but very elaborate name with unique spelling. production, like your name's Sean and it's like production or something like that. It's just going to be hard for people to spell. So maybe take it easy on the name if you're going to just be a freelancer. If you're trying to build something bigger, invest in a name, get yourself a name with purpose. That's been very important to me in my life, a name with a true purpose. But if it's just you, relax. Do you need to file under a DBA? Do you need to become an LLC? Should you like to go with a full S corp, LMNOP? Just another acronym there. A lot of acronyms, a lot of things to choose from here. I would probably run as a maybe a DBA the first year, and by the first year I mean maybe 6 months. Wherever you are in the year, if you decide to do this summer, maybe just do a DBA for the fall and kind of see how it's going. It's going to cost you, a few $100 to get set up as an LLC, and that may not be worth it if for whatever reason you try it and you don't like it. You try it and nobody will pay you more than $50. That's a problem. You try it and there's just no opportunity in the marketplace. You try it and you realize it's all union, or they fly people in or something, who knows? And you just can't get any traction. I'd hate for you to have $900 sunk in to get an LLC set up and you only got $300 gigs that year. And so you literally did all the LLC paperwork and you worked your butt off on site and networked and did all this stuff. And you came out with $0. I mean, at that point, you're in the hole for the time that you spent on it. So maybe just relax and do a DBA at first, and then go to an LLC, and then I'd probably stop. You can do an S corp. We're an S corp at our production company. It's just, and we're not big. We're very small. We're just a little bit bigger than a couple of freelancers, but we're an S corp. But an LLC will get the job done. Last thing I'll say here: I'm not a lawyer. I can't give actual advice here. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. There's all sorts of little things I'll say in this. I need to squeeze that disclaimer in there. You're an adult. You're a human being who needs to be responsible for your own stuff and do your own research. This can be part of your research, but I'm not those things. So don't take the direct legal and accounting and advice from me. This is just my perspective from the production standpoint. I can maybe speak your language a little bit more than they'll be able to. But I'm losing my train of thought there. DBA, LLC, S corp. What I wanted to say was I was a little mistaken. I thought that if I set myself up as an S corp, the whole point of that was for it to be completely detached from me, and people could never come after me. If we got sued, it all stops at the business. If the business goes bankrupt, we don't lose our house. If all these things, I was told you've got to protect yourself as an individual, and you want to separate that all out. And that is true. It is true. It does protect you. But at the end of the day, you are taking very serious risks by doing this. And there's no way to flee those risks entirely. And I think I had rose-colored glasses on when I thought by doing all this S corp paperwork, heaven forbid, we take a job and a tornado hits it and it wipes us out and the insurance doesn't pay, or just something, I don't know, something crazy happens, catastrophic, that I would always be protected. And it's just not the case. Those effects are going to hit me personally. They're going to hit my family in some way. And so, we're doing a lot larger projects as a company, and there's risks associated with that at the S corp level compared to this DBA and LLC level, but it'll always be tied to you. So I would just say, bluntly, act responsibly and be as risk averse as you can as an entrepreneur, and don't get in over your head, because there's really no amount of layers that can actually protect you. Even if it's as simple as, let's say my whole business did fold from the pandemic or something like that. Praise God that the pandemic is coming to an end. But let's say that it did fold during that season, a very stressful time. It's going to wreck my credit. It's going to affect, our ability to get a mortgage. It's going to do very serious things. So you can never be fully detached from it. So don't overthink that if you go for the S corp that you'll be gaining a lot of protection. Start with a DBA, that's zero protection, and then go LLC, and that's probably good enough. Business cards, I put this in here. I mentioned earlier, folks love to come up with a big fancy name, and again, I think that's great if you're going to open like a retail spot or something that you've got a lot of foot traffic and need to advertise. But if it's just you, don't go overboard. Business cards are okay. Get yourself some business cards. I think that's great. It's a little old school now. I hand out business cards and people are kind of like, oh, that's neat that you still have those. But I think they're good. You're going to be meeting a lot of people, and they're going to be on site and busy, and no offense, but they're not going to remember you. They're not going to remember your first name 30 seconds after you walk away. So I would get a business card, black and white. Don't worry about putting a fancy logo on it. Don't worry about getting it all cute or thick, fancy paper. Just Cameron McGee, phone number, email address, maybe on the back, but production professional, audio, video, lighting, whatever it is. But I keep it really dang broad, because once you order 100 of those or 500 of those, that's what's in ink, and your career is going to kind of shift and navigate and change. You may get into directing and realize you really like sports directing, and it's really softball directing that you're really good at for the SEC. And so you're going to want eventually on your business card to say softball SEC director, not just production professional, audio, video, lighting. So the less ink, the better. Just keep it timeless, real clean, good contrast, black and white maybe. That's business cards. Don't go get a bunch of koozies and frisbees and mail them to your family and stuff. Those aren't your customers. You focus on the 100 customers in your town, and there's really about 3 decision makers. So maybe drop them off a gift card or something like that, but don't order 100 t-shirts or something crazy. I think this is my last point on section 2, and then I'll advance to section 3. I really want to encourage you to be keeping a portfolio. There's a freelancer in town here who I really respect, and he's done a really good job the past year or two. He just takes a quick 2 pictures on his iPhone at every show. He takes like a wide shot, and he takes kind of like maybe a selfie or like a more of a close-up shot of what he's working on that day. Post it to his website. 2 sentences, not a big deal. Here I am directing cameras for the local concert venue. Another post. This was a great Sunday at so-and-so church. Love serving there when their volunteers are out. Great time helping install this LED video wall for a local theater. Excited to see that larger screen come to life. That's really cool. And when I get on his website, which again, don't overdo it, don't get a bunch of koozies. He's got a free, simple website, a couple of pictures on it, a couple of sentences, his contact information, it looks good. And it's a good excuse for him to do a LinkedIn post. Every time he kind of posts those 2 photos to his website as a blog post, he could kind of grab that and put it over here on LinkedIn or Facebook as a little plug for himself. Here's what I was up to. It keeps people kind of top of mind for you. And when somebody gets on your website and kind of flicks through and scrolls through that portfolio, it brings a lot of authority. It says, this guy really knows what he's doing. He has seen a lot bigger shows than what I was thinking about hiring for. And I've got a lot of confidence that he's probably the guy. That's how you want people looking at you. That's how you want to be positioned. Not, hey, I'm $50 and you tell me what you think. You want to get away from that. That's how you start. But over time, this portfolio, this is 2 or 3 years later, this is later than my example earlier. You want to be building a good compilation of what you're up to. I think it's really healthy. So start an Instagram account or something like that, a little website. Last point, or last section, part 3, we're talking about operations. I'm keeping an eye on the clock and making sure we're okay. I don't see any Q&A. If you got something during this, feel free to throw it in there. I won't look at it till the end, but you don't have to wait till the end to post it. And again, if you have any other general questions, I'll take those at the end as well. It's just kind of a bonus of how we do these webinars for members. So hold on to those. Operations. This is now nitty gritty. So if kind of part 1 was getting, kind of getting set up, getting a mindset, part 2, getting set up, then part 3 is operations. So something simple, a freelancer mentor of mine told me early on in my career, and I so appreciate it and keep up with him even today. He said, Cameron, just walk into your bank where you already have your personal checking account. Tell them you need a second checking account. Most banks, the first checking account's free. And sometimes if you've been a good customer there for a few years, they'll even get you a second checking account for free. And just keep all your business transactions in that account. This is another area where people can get like way overboard. You waltz in the bank tomorrow and say you need to set up a business account. All the forms are going to come out, all the paperwork. We need to see your government registration as an LLC. We got to ship this off to the state, you got to notarize this and all this stuff. I don't think that's necessary for the first 6 months you can be in business. Like I said earlier, you want to start out with a DBA and just see if this thing's going to work, see if this flywheel is going to turn. So just open up a second checking account, save all the energy from not getting koozies and frisbees, and actually do this. Darn it. Do not put a dime of your freelancing and kind of side income into your normal checking. And do not spend a dime on whatever expenses are necessary for this freelancing thing out of your normal checking. New, fresh, clean checking account. Walk in there the first day, put $100 in it. Two $50 bills. Put in there, you got a $100 starting balance. And first time you get a job, you say, hey, I'm $300 a day for 2 days. You get that job finished. You send an invoice, which I'll talk about in a second. 30 days later, they send you the $600. You put that $600 in that checking account, period. Then when you go to order your business cards for $50, you order them, pull that $50 out of your business checking account. Again, I'm saying business checking account. Don't actually get a formal fancy pants business checking account. Just get a second personal one. And it just becomes a very simple P&L for you, a very simple kind of chart of accounts of just on this day, this happened, this day, this happened. You're not going to have more than 3 or 4 transactions a month for 12 months. Talking less than 100 line items for the year, but it's a good portrait of your business of kind of what's coming in and what's going out. I will do a side note here. This topic would be an entirely different webinar and kind of compensation strategy and what you should do for yourself. But I would, I'd maybe work for 6 months without pulling anything out. And then I would start a slow trickle where you say, I pay myself $100 a month. And I do that for a whole year. And you're going to be building a ridiculous stockpile over here. And then give yourself a raise, $200 a month. Still got a stockpile. You're just dripping out of the stockpile faster now. $300 a month, whatever. Until you kind of say, okay, now I'm paying myself this, and the reservoir is sitting here, and it's kind of going down, and then it's going up, and it's going down, it's going up. But I like the range at which my reservoir, the checking account, is moving, and I'm able to always pay myself a consistent amount. You never want to have a pay cut, and you never want a surprise where you don't get paid for 4 months. And if you don't do a job for 4 months, that's fine. That's going to happen. Droughts are going to happen. That's why you want that cushion, and you can start to deplete that as you go, and you're still paying yourself an equal amount. It causes kind of a delay. If you have that 6 month delay when you start and you're not making 600 and paying yourself 600 and blowing it, if you're always just kind of giving yourself like half, but not even half sporadically, you want a monthly slow drip. It's not about you did a big job so you paid yourself. You get a monthly slow drip out of that thing. Anyways, that's another kind of webinar in of itself, but get a standard checking account. That'll also give you checks and things, online banking. Invoicing. Keep it simple. There's a whole theme in this. I want you to have very minimal risk in this. A lot of people get so much energy spent in the business setup time that they're exhausted by the time they get all the paperwork and everything done. And they don't have any energy left to go network and actually get the business going. So you have a beautiful dollhouse and nothing to play with in it. Not that analogy stands up, but invoicing, real simple. Word document. I like Excel. If you can do Excel, you want to put your name, phone number, email address, and you want to put your business name, street, mailing address. You want to do the same for them over here. Here's the guy who called me, his email and phone, or her email and phone, and then their business name, address, invoice in big letters at the top. Right under invoice terms, net 30, meaning the day they receive this invoice, it is due 30 days after that. Pretty standard. Don't expect if you send an invoice in that they're magically going to pay you the next day. It's just not the way the business world works. And if you do put due upon receipt, you can expect to get paid in like 50 days. It's just going to get set on the back burner. You want to put very reasonable request, net 30. And then you're also going to put the date at the top of the invoice. So maybe that's over here, date, and then invoice number. So you can start with 1, or you could do 1001, or it's the year 2021. So you could do 2021-01, however you want to do it. 001 if you think you're going to send more than 99 invoices this year. Congratulations. Do 3 digits. So 2021-001. And then that's the whole kind of preamble at the top, and your half won't change. The date and invoice number will, but the customer will change invoice and the terms. And then just a real simple, it's just like getting a receipt at Walmart. 2 bananas, $1 a piece, $2, So you want to put 2 production tech, $300 each, $600 total. I like to put some detail on there. I like to see detail on there, maybe underneath that, like small italic font. You put the date. This was on February 14th and 15th, 2021. I like to put the name of the show. It's just courteous for them. This was for the City of Lowell convention, annual convention, or whatever, just so they know what it was. Put your position, director on day one and stream tech on day two. Give them just a little bit of information. It really helps. It's not you wasting your time being over communicating. It's you strategically and intentionally making sure that this gets paid. You want to over communicate so that it doesn't get caught up in processing and they say, what was this? And I need to look at that next week. And then 2 months go by and you haven't gotten paid. So over communicate. But 2 production tech, 300 each, 600 total. Maybe you had to stay overnight for this travel. So half day travel there. So 0.5 travel day, 300 equals 150, 0.5 of 300. Travel day back, 0.5 of that. Per diem, if you were there for one night, you do 3/4 for the first day of travel and 3/4 for the second, and then a full amount of per diem for every day that you're there. And you can Google that by zip code. Washington, D.C. pays a lot more than Bentonville, Arkansas. So you put that per diem on there at the federal rate, sum all that up. So 600, and then it was 150, so 900, and then $50 in per diem, 950. Maybe you had mileage or flights or whatever to get there. Those are all expenses. Anything like that, you want to get that approved before you spend it. You want to make sure that they're good for your flight before you put yourself on the hook for it, because it's not their responsibility if you didn't ask. And then sum it up down to the bottom. Okay, it's 950. There you go. Sometimes people put a little sentence on there that says, like, for any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to speak with you. Thanks. And that's just kind of a warm way for the accounting person to know that, you're not some big cold business. It's just you. Make that in Excel. Sometimes people like to make it in Word or the Apple Pages or whatever. Flip it out as a PDF. Do not send it as a Word document or something they can type on and accidentally erase something. Flatten it out as a PDF. Email it to your production manager, whoever hired you. When you do that, keep an Excel spreadsheet somewhere, Excel or Google Sheets, real simple, and just put that as a line item. The February 14, 15 gig, 950. And just start those line items for yourself where you can kind of keep an eye of what the revenue is. I also put things in that spreadsheet when it books. So somebody may book me 60 days out. I go ahead and put it in the spreadsheet. I take the total number, if it's going to be 950, and I bump it over columns so that it doesn't get summed in my kind of total column, because I like to see total how I'm doing for the year. I'll bump that out of the column. So it's over here. It's kind of a, don't count your chickens before they hatch. It's standing by and I can move it over. That gives me a total for the year. Just kind of some business basics here. And now you've got a good spreadsheet view of how you're looking. You've got your invoice template. Yeah, that's all that. You can sign up for QuickBooks Online. You can sign up for all these things. Again, I wouldn't for the first 6 months. I might not for the first 18 months. You can keep it real down to earth. As long as you're organized and remind yourself to actually send these invoices and follow up with them when you don't receive them. Check them off the list when you do receive them. You'll be just fine. Receipts, kind of the same deal as the little spreadsheet I told you earlier. Just like you've got 950 coming in and 600 coming in this column, and you're moving it over here. If it hasn't happened yet, then you slide it over. Same way you want to do a line, business cards, kind of an expected business card expenses can be $50. So minus 50. You want to have that in your column so you kind of know how you're looking for the year. It's important. That column's going to look really ugly at first because you're going to have a lot of costs like receipts, and it's going to drive you to get out and network. So simple there, not a big deal. Take a picture of your receipt on your iPhone, immediately throw it in the trash. I've started a habit. As soon as I get the receipt at the restaurant or the gas pump or whatever it is, I get the receipt, take the picture, and then I enjoy crumpling up and throwing it away because I have the picture. I don't keep the receipt. That's silly. It's hard to keep up with. The picture is forever. It's instantly uploaded to the cloud. So again, you can get QuickBooks, you can get things fancy for that, but any accountant, if you handed them 2 or 3 real organized spreadsheets and a Dropbox folder full of images, dated, where you just kind of change the name of the file. Don't leave it as like iPhone is like IMG1234. Change that to just the date dash Dairy Queen or whatever it was. You give a decent account of that, they're just going to love you. They would rather have a simple system that you followed than a complex system that you didn't. I think this is my last point. Just want to make a remark about taxes in the end of the year. With anything you make as a freelancer, you got to keep in mind, this is not the same as being an employee. I think we all know, maybe when we get our paycheck, maybe we get paid $1,000 or whatever you make. I don't know what the math is on that, so forgive me if that doesn't add up to something normal. But let's say you make $1,000 every time you get paid at your job or something. Well, you know that you probably only bring home whatever it is, $700 of that or something by the time everything's taken out. If healthcare is taken out, it's even less. But so I think most of the world kind of gets that. Oh, darn it, we have to pay all these taxes and things. What you don't see is the business is also paying. If it's 1,000 and you're only getting 700, usually the business is really paying 1,300. There's a whole lot of tax that the business is paying, and then you're paying before it trickles down to your member. And so it's important that you keep that in mind. It'd be a shame if you made $10,000 for the year and were completely oblivious to the fact that you do owe the government percentage of that. It's just the way the world goes around, whether you're an employer or employee or a freelancer on a 1099 basis, a contractor, you're going to need to pay taxes. So rule of thumb, I would set aside 25% of every paycheck for taxes. You'll be off plus or minus 5%, not the end of the world. Just don't spend all the rest of your money and you'll be fine. But as soon as you get a $600 check-in, just set 150 of it aside. And you can do that in that little spreadsheet. You can kind of do a column and have it auto do a little formula where it takes 25% of that and sums that up. And then okay, I made $10,000 this year. I've got 2,500 of that set aside for the government. And so I've got 7,500 left, and I paid myself $500 a month. So I've paid out 6,000 of that this year. So I've got 1,500 sitting around in cash. And I've also got 2,500 in cash, and I'm planning on paying that to the government when I run my taxes in March or April. Last thing I'll say here, and I put end of year. People always go crazy in December. They look up and they start to realize like, oh, I made $10,000 this year. And yeah, I've set aside 2,500 of that to pay the government because they want 25% of what I profited. Well, if I could line up a bunch of business expenses, then that would really reduce my profit and reduce how much tax I owe. That thinking is just a little bit dangerous. And, if there's something you're going to buy anyways, or something that's necessary, you're going to buy it anyways. It is necessary. If anywhere in your thought process of buying something is like, oh yeah, that'll help my taxes, that's just unnecessary gasoline on the fire towards making an unwise purchase. And then literally, if the inverse of that happens, if it's the end of the year and you start this sentence with, I need to find a way to offset my taxes, so I'm going to buy this, fill in the blank. That sentence is so backwards. Don't spend or waste money to avoid paying taxes. I'll help you with the math on that. The government's going to take 25% or whatever of your profit. That's a lot less than you spending all of it. You would still be able to keep some of it. And business is not about toys and buying yourself a new boat. It's about sustaining it and being able to still be here next year. You've worked really hard to settle this stuff up. You've worked really hard to network. You've worked your whole life to get your skill sets ready. Don't go upside down and bankrupt and out of business because you were foolish with how reckless you spent the money. You're probably really talented and you can solve a whole lot of technical problems. I always say I can solve any problem but a money problem. So you definitely want to have some cash on hand. So just be smart about that. Don't get to the end of the year and dump, $5,000 into a boat or something like that, whatever you decide is a business expense. And then look up in April and realize you don't have any money to pay the taxes. Or look up in the summer when you're in a drought and you can't pay yourself the regular $500 a month that you're actually counting on because you bought this boat. Keep your assets liquid because liquid's malleable. I think that was my last point for tonight, which means I'll just leave you with this GIF. Now you just wait, Cookie Monster's sitting here waiting on the world to change. Once you have all this stuff set up, again, last week you decided you may want to be a freelancer. this week you've kind of gotten the mindset right, you've gotten it set up, and you've kind of done the finishing touches here. You're just waiting. So get out there and network and do these things, follow through on these things, and just, it's going to take some time. So it's not something you can just spin up tomorrow. If it's something you could spin up tomorrow, it'd be something you could spin back down in a hurry. That's just not the case. This is a long journey. And once you network and make these connections, these will be people that you work with 10 years from now. It's amazing how far back some of my relationships go. And we're all getting old, and it's fun to grow old together, looking back on what we've got to accomplish together. It's not a quick game, folks. It's a crock pot, not a microwave. I'll take questions now. Let me get out of my keynote and I'll check. I don't think anybody's submitted any questions. I don't see a single thing in the Q&A. Let me check YouTube. No questions. That's all right, folks. Well, in that case, let me wrap us up, and then I will stay on late tonight to answer any other questions that aren't related to this topic. So again, I'm Ken with LearnAVL. It's Tuesday at 8. We do this every week. It's been great to do these. We've been doing this all first quarter this year. And Michael's is tomorrow at 8. And Phillips is Monday. And so just kind of hang out in that weekly rhythm. Hop on the forums, engage there. Don't be a lurker. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here to do. We're here to mentor you, and you guys are here to be here for each other. So thanks. I'm going to call it a night. It's been a really long day for me. I'm glad to be off the air. But if you guys need anything, I'll stick around for just a little bit. For now, I'm going to turn my camera off and stop the recording.